So like I was saying, it is, it's okay. It is tempting, though. You get, kind of wrapped up in what you're supposed to be doing, and that can lead you to do things you're not supposed to be doing. And it's tempting to want to pull out all the stops. Now, do you know what pull out all the stops means? It's actually an organ phrase, because they have all these pipes up here. They have all these little stops that you use so that only some of the tubes are blowing air at once. I mean, you pull out all the stops, you get this. Luke was going to demonstrate. Right. So I thought today to do something a little different and not pull out all the stops. And that's why there's nothing up on the screen. We have this really cool screen. And every week we have images, and I usually tell some jokes, and we have some fun stuff going on. And today, I'm just going to talk about the story. We have this story that we're here to remember, to retell on Easter. And if you think about the story a little bit, I know there are many people here who have grown up with the story of Jesus. I think of Lizzie, my daughter, who, we were talking about the Bible from the time she was 2 or 3. In my family, in my family it was a little different. My dad read the Bible to me, but it didn't mean he expected me to just accept it. So we were always kind of poking into what was in there. And I got to tell you, as I grew older, and for a long time, most of my friends and family were people who had no real experience with church. And I'll tell you, if you step outside for a minute, and maybe you are or have been somebody who didn't really know too much about the story. But if you're one of those people who was raised with it, try to step outside for a minute and look at it from the other side. Okay, so we got this guy. He's about 2,000 years ago. He was this carpenter, kind of maybe a middle-class guy, maybe a peasant, but not rich. And he didn't seem to have any education, but for no obvious reason, he jumped up and started wandering around the countryside preaching. And he got some followers, and things were going pretty good. And then he got a little carried away, went to Jerusalem, and started to mix it up with the Romans and the religious authorities, and so he got executed. And then, much to everyone's surprise, he came back to life, and because of that, we all get to go to heaven. When you put it that way, it's kind of a weird story. It's not immediately obvious what all this has to do with us. It's not clear why we should even take this seriously. We have all the stories of miracles, but, as people point out, the people who told all those stories about what Jesus did were the people who were following him. And you don't have to look too hard to find people around in our world who have followers who say, well, they're amazing. And everybody else is looking at it a little funny. It's a weird story we're here to celebrate today. It's strange. But it's a good story. Better than I made it sound, believe me. First of all, you have these people who followed him right up to the end, and he gets defeated, and then he comes back. And how many stories can you think of? Every superhero movie follows the plot of Jesus' life. It's not a coincidence. But, the hero finds his powers, he goes out, he has some friends who believe in him, they go do their thing, and he gets up and the villain's just about to defeat him, right? Whether it's the kryptonite or the better armor or whatever it is. And just as the hero looks like he's about to get wiped out forever, something turns around at the last minute, and there he is. It's not coincidence that every superhero movie is borrowing their plot from the Bible. It's a good story. it's also kind of deep-rooted in there, you know. Those of us who can't do church too much, you still need something, and so, you know, maybe Iron Man. But this passage we read today is another side of it. And you could say, if I'm talking about the action movie side of the story, the hero coming back, defying the odds, maybe this is the Chick-fil-A side of the story. Where Jesus rises from the grave, and Mary Magdalene, who's an interesting person, now leaving out all the Da Vinci Code stuff, Mary Magdalene was Jesus' closest friend. His most faithful follower. Like, that's very clear from the Bible and the stuff around the Bible that we know to be true. That Mary had this very close relationship with Jesus. She was the one who stood by him, and she's the first one who went to the tomb. You know, one thing about a story, if people are, one way you know a story is true is when they put things in it that people would rather have left out. And one thing that all the stories about Jesus tell us is that Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, found out that Jesus had risen from the dead, went back and told all the men, and none of them believed her. That's not something you would put in there if you're one of the guys writing the story. If you're trying to make yourself look good, you're going to leave that out. So this moment where Mary Magdalene comes and meets Jesus, it's important. And when she meets him, it says she thought he was the gardener. And that kind of tells you how strange this whole thing is. Imagine going up to your best friend and not knowing who they were. And then he looks at her and says, Mary. And suddenly she knows it's him. They meet each other and they know each other. And that moment, everything changes, not just for Mary, not just for Jesus, but for everybody. She goes back, not right away, she goes back and she tells them, and they don't get it. They don't understand what happened. But then Jesus comes to them, and this is where the story gets really interesting. And he says, receive the Holy Spirit. Receive the Holy Spirit. He gives them something. Now, earlier, Jesus told them, it's better for me to leave, because if I leave, I can send you the Holy Spirit. And he does. Now, what is the Holy Spirit about? Well, it's pretty simple. The Holy Spirit is what connects this story. What connects this story to us. You see, the thing about the story of Jesus, this thing that happened 2,000 years ago, is that it changes people, right? The disciples, to me, you can argue about what makes people, or what makes the Bible believable. You can talk about why should we think that this crazy story is true? But the thing that comes out of it is that these guys and women who were gathered around Jesus, they weren't particularly bold people. And every one of them, they doubted, they wouldn't do anything, they hid. Peter denied Jesus. They weren't particularly bold people. They weren't particularly good people. They weren't particularly anything. And Jesus says, I'm giving you the Holy Spirit. And when they receive that, they start to change. They start to do things differently. They're not the same as they were before. And that change has been taking place in people ever since.